Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie Wizard. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. Okay, hello Heather Drain. We are here today to talk about the Frank Henenlotter documentary, That's Sexploitation. But may you first introduce yourself to my audience?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, my name is Heather Drain, and I am a writer. I mainly do nonfiction. I've also done prose, but my specialty tends to be sort of what I call outre cinema and music. Basically, works of art that range anywhere from cult and horror, and as we'll be talking tonight, sexploitation to art house, the punk rock, to heavy metal, everything in between. Just everything that's basically kind of off on a little bit off the beaten path.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fun stuff. So let's start from the beginning of the documentary of That Sexploitation, which is a pretty comprehensive history of nudity in film from the 20s to the 70s. So let's start from the beginning. What can you say about porn from the 1920s?
Well, I would not call myself an expert on that era. I will say this, that something that I've always found really fascinating and that I love that this film touched upon is that I think a lot of people kind of have this impression of their ancestors and just people in the past in general of being very quaint and, husband and wife sleep in two separate beds and all of this. And kind of the cool thing about sort of whether it's like old erotica or even just sort of like B movies is it gives us actually, in a weird way, kind of a more realistic peek into that culture. And it's like, well, yes, they're human beings. Of course, as soon as, somebody could develop the technology of film, somebody right behind him was like, hey, let's get some women naked. Let's get some men naked. Let's do that. Of course, erotica as visual arts is as old as cave paintings. So I haven't really seen any whole works of straight up erotica from the 20s, so I can't really vouch for it. You do get some kind of cool, sort of fascinating glimpses in this film, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's great is on That Sexploitation, you have the documentary, and then you have that 4-hour reel of just, nudity and porn from, like I said, the 20s to the 70s. And it's cool, we you're right. People do think puritanically, of this these people that nobody knows about before World War II, and that they're just a bunch of stiffs. But no, they'd film themselves, having sex with their wife, and put it on celluloid. There's no real censorship. So that's fun stuff. So then censorship sort of comes in at the 1940s. What can you say about that?
Well, censorship really, at least in the United States, really started coming into play a lot earlier on, I'd say in the 30s, with between Joseph Breen and the Catholic Legion of Decency and, of course, the Hays Code. You can usually kind of tell. It's fascinating when you studying culture and the art of censorship. Censorship tends to, or how it's sort of approached, reflects on what's going on in the culture. Like if the culture is getting more conservative, obviously things are going to get more conservative as far as what they feel like consenting adults can and cannot see. What's fascinating about this film, though, is it really gives a good peek into what's called the roadshow movies. Like Mom and Dad, and and there's so many others. Basically, just kind of these films that people would travel. So they weren't really under the Hollywood or Catholic Church sort of watchful eye. And these were all sort of presented as educational films. That they were at heart total exploitation films, and would have actual footage of childbirth or you'd have nudity, but it'd be the people riddled with venereal diseases. I mean, none of it was tantalizing.
It's not very sexy.
But it was a way to kind of operate outside the sort of strict boundaries of the studio Hollywood system.
Yeah, not very sexy stuff. So let's fast forward a little bit to the Nudie Cuties, the nudist camp movies.
Oh, yes.
So what can you say about these movies?
The nudie cuties are, I mean, I can't think of a genre that better is epitomized by its own title. The nudie cuties, basically, which were kind of founded, I mean, you actually have nudist camp movies dating back to the 30s, but as far as nudie cuties themselves, I would say kind of originate with the absolute man himself, the brilliant, late, great Russ Meyer.
Who,
he's for my money, is one of the best American auteurs ever. I love him. And his film, The Immoral Mr. Tease. And basically, you have a genre where there would be nudity, which the nudity, for the most part, is mainly topless women, maybe some buttocks. If there's men in it, there's always going to be, like, strategically placed, like, you know, shrubbery or, you know, like, or, you know, or car or something, you know, so you don't ever actually see, like, you very rarely see full frontal male nudity. And actually not until probably, I'd say, like, the mid-'60s did you really see full frontal female. So and they were very, like, a very innocuous genre, not at all erotic. Like, it's never, you know, it may be kind of cheeky, no pun intended, but very, very tame by today's standards. But there's a lot of charm to them. And some of the titles, you know, are great. You got, you know, especially like the Doris Wishman stuff, like, you know, Nude on the Moon and stuff like that.
Nude on the Moon actually played in Ottawa recently.
Oh,
I know.
I'm so jealous. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, okay, so what are some of your all-time favorite 1960s smut movies?
Oh, well, what comes first and foremost to my mind is one of my favorite directors / actors / writers was Michael Finlay. And along with his then wife, Roberta Finlay, they made a number of really great, fascinating sexploitation movies, and culminating with what I call the Flesh trilogy, with Touch of Her Flesh, Curse of Her Flesh, and Kiss of Her Flesh. And I think it's really, you can make a good point that in some ways, like, the seeds of what we know now as the slasher genre were started. I mean, the first one was probably Psycho, but with the Flesh trilogy, you have Richard Jennings, who's the main character, played by Michael Finlay, and he is a perpetual killer and character throughout all three movies. And I can't really think of any film series before the mid-'60s that had a continuity of the same killer. I mean, unless you're counting maybe like Dr. Maboose or, you know, something like that. But as far as like a slasher, though, no. And Michael Finlay's stuff, he was very literate. So it's like a fascinating mix between like really tawdry, lurid, insanely lurid pulp detective novel kind of violence, but then like with an artiness to it. Like you can, you know, like some of the language is very poetic, the music is great, the angles, you know, Roberta was a great camera woman, and that helped. And so, yeah, Michael, the Flesh trilogy for sure. Also, there's a film called, which it's not really, I wouldn't really call it a sexploitation film purely, but it was promoted as one called Feast of Flesh.
Ooh,
and
yummy.
It was actually an Argentinian movie, originally called Placer. My Spanish is terrible, so warning. Placer de Sangriento. And that film is just beautiful and haunting. And just, and that's to me, like, one of the things that got me into sexploitation is a lot of films that, you know, are called that and are in that genre are, you know, it to me just as creative in some ways and expressive and worthy of evaluation as anything by Bergman, you know, or Godard, you know, and I love those guys too. You know, I think there's room for everybody.
Absolutely. So David Friedman made his last appearance in this documentary, That's Sexploitation, and he's sort of the guiding spiritual force throughout. So please tell my audience a bit about him.
Oh, goodness. We would have to truly do justice to David Friedman. We'd have to do a whole other, like,
True.
a 2-hour podcast episode or something. But David Friedman was, he got his start actually working in the Hollywood studio system behind the scenes. But the lure of, like, the road shows, and he even worked at Carnival. Like, he was Carney Barker, which is amazing, pulled him in. And from there, he basically used it to kind of get into filmmaking himself. He worked with Herschel Gordon Lewis on, you know, what was legitimately the first gore movie, which is Blood Feast. He also made a number of sexploitation films, and eventually actually was one of the very few like filmmakers from that era that transitioned into adult. Like he made films all the way into the early 80s. And I think he basically got kind of out of adult for the same reason why a lot of the legit filmmakers did, which was basically the transition to video and the transition away from, having films that were films, like with plot and story, to more just sort of, it's almost like porn kind of regressed to its origins, which is like the loops.
Oh, geez.
But yeah, I mean, Friedman's career just is awe-inspiring, and just any interview you see with him, whether it's in this film or if you go on YouTube and look at his interview on Real Wild Cinema, just the grandpa you always wanted, or at the very least the saucy uncle, like just this gregarious storyteller, larger than life, good-humored, just an oak of a man.
Yeah, and Blood Feast, what a classic, the first splatter movie.
Oh, I love Blood Feast. I mean, come on, like you have Mal, I believe his name is Mal Arnold, who plays the main killer Fawad Ramsey with his eyebrows and fume.
Yeah,
it's so good.
It's incredible. It's incredible. So, okay, how do you think porn could be improved upon nowadays?
I mean, I'm an old school girl at heart, so I basically, would love to see. And I think, I don't really keep up with the modern stuff that much. And in fact, I'd kind of argue that the stuff I write about, I write about all kinds of movies, but when it comes to adult, it's more of the classic era and more like films that happen to have sex. Not to sound like snobby, but I would like to see that because, in the 70s you had directors, in the 80s too, you had directors ranging from like Gerard Damiano and Cecil Howard and Radley Metzger to Stephen Sadian, whose work I'm actually working on a book about. And these were all artists, first and foremost, and they used kind of the genre of adult to explore everything from surrealist visual imagery to exploring just kind of nuances of human relationships. Like sex is obviously a part of life. That's how all of us got here. As much as none of us want to think about our parents having sex. but it's and so I think kind of that. You watch like Devil and Mrs. Jones. It's like a Bergman movie. It's not like a porn. It's not a porn. In fact, because there are European films that have explicit sex. But those are never called porn because they're quote unquote art house. And that's because it's how they're marketed. But it's, it's classism, I think, in a way, sort of like art classism. And that's a wrong I always hope to right a little bit.
Yeah, when I see like new age porn, it just seems like dehumanizing filth. And like a Russ Meyer movie, he sort of unironically just loves boobs and war in a narrative. That's just all I want to see. Like just like full-hearted love of boobs in a narrative, and less like dehumanizing, like this kind of like hatred or huge like feelings of frustration revolving around sex. I don't dig it.
No, of course. The thing with Russ is he actually, even though he was one of the people that bucked the trends of ever going into actual like porn, and actually it's fascinating because most of the sexploitation guys really didn't. Most of them did not want to go into explicit sex. Like Friedman was one of the very few, as well as Radley Metzger and Roberta Findlay. Those are really the main three. I'm sure there are a few others, but Michael Finlay as well. But a lot of the other guys didn't. They didn't want to. But yeah, with Russ, I think I've seen some people online try to accuse him of being misogynistic, but to me, like when you watch a Russ Meyer film, really the biggest boobs in his films are the male characters. Like he loves women, he worships women, and all of the women in his films are like these Amazons. They are like these strong women. I'm like, why? I'm like, because I consider myself a feminist, and I consider Russ Meyer one of my favorite artists because of like, I can't. I don't think a woman like Tura Satana is going to work with the misogynist. Like that was a strong, beautiful, just kick butt woman.
Yeah, that's interesting. God, that's cool. Yeah, I think like if you love boobs and like female body parts, like this is make you maybe it makes you a pig, like to really get off on it all the time. But Doesn't mean you hate women. I mean, come on.
Oh no, I mean, far from it's like anything in life. It's just how it's all in the approach, and I think that usually shows with art and with any genre of art and film too. You know, if somebody you can usually get the vibe of where someone's head's at. If someone clearly has issues with men or women, has some gender issues in a way that they're not, you know, willing to kind of explore in an honest way with themselves in film, that'll show. I mean, honestly, I think you'd probably make more of an argument that like a Michael Bay film is probably more sexist than any sexploitation film, you know, from the 20s to the 70s.
That's beautiful. What a wonderful comment. So how much time do you think is healthy to watch porn?
Well, I mean, I don't really consider myself an expert on porn per se. So
or maybe not like porn, but like smut or sexploitation. Even just like, yeah.
Well, I mean, healthy may be a little bit subjective. I think it depends on why you're watching maybe things. I mean, you don't want to get carpal tunnel or anything.
Right. I say 2 hours. That's what I say.
Right, but no, I mean, seriously, I think it's good to have a diverse diet of anything, and that includes film. You know, I think if all you watch, you know, there's nothing wrong. There are people that love like the Marvel movies, and if that generally makes them happy, that's awesome. Like, I mean, it's not my bag, but I think it's healthy. Like, okay, you watched Iron Man, maybe, you know, watch, you know, Kiss Me Quick, or, you know, House on Bear Mountain. And then watch an Argento film, watch Inferno, then, you know, throw on some Kurosawa, then throw on a Troma movie, you know, just get all the colors of the rainbow.
Oh, wow. God damn. All right. So would you do an audio commentary track to a sexploitation movie, or have you done that yet?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, actually, in fact, the first commentary track I got to record ever, and it was such an awesome experience, was with my colleagues Kat Ellinger and Sam Deegan, who were both you know, good friends of mine, and also women who have just kicked so much ass in our field of film writing in general and film commentaries. And we did a commentary track for Vinegar Syndrome's release of Andy Milligan's Flesh Pot on 42nd Street.
Oh my God.
Which I highly recommend, not just because we're on it, but it's a beautiful restoration of it, and for my money, and I love Andy Milligan in general, but I would say it's Milligan's best movie. Wow,
that's pretty cool. Okay, well, Heather Drain, thank you very much for your time. It's been a very interesting conversation. May you please tell me what you have planned for the year 2020?
Absolutely. Well, I would be remiss if I did not plug. I have recently written a book called The Bizarro Encyclopedia of Film, Volume 1, with the great John Skipp. And for those of you who don't know John Skipp, you know, New York Times best-selling writer, was one of the godfathers of splatterpunk. The reboot of Creepshow, he's one of the writers on one of the episodes. John is legit street cred, just ubermensch, and me and him got together, and along with our illustrator Paula Handak, have created a absolute tome of passion, love, smart, heart, all of the arts about bizarre film, Volume 1. So we go in a deep dive with key films. We have a video store index and a tribute to George Romero and so much more. And you can get that off of Amazon, Barnes & Noble online, among any other places. If you have a local independent bookstore and you want to support them, which I encourage you to do, ask them for it. And, you know, and you can always follow me at my website, which is mondoheather.com.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you so much for having me on, and you guys have a great night.